We are pleased to have with us as our moderator today, Marty Coates. Marty is with a consulting group that does some work for the CIADA in South Carolina. Marty also happens to be a former legislator, with the South Carolina legislature. So he has done this on both sides. So we're pleased to have Marty to moderate our panel. I'm going to turn the time over to him.
Thank you, Sean. I'm delighted to be here and be a part of our discussion this afternoon, and to be on the side of the discussion where I get to ask most of the questions. We have a distinguished panel to field some of those questions. So let me just get straight to introductions very quickly. Most of these folks are not known to you. Gus Camacho from California, he's the California State President. Arlen Keene from Nebraska, chairman obviously here of NIADA. Wayne Jones from Utah, executive director there, works with some other associations I think as well. Todd O'Connell with Colorado, the executive director. And leading the charge for us today on the panel is Karen Rye with Cox Automotive. She's also, legislative chairman for NAAA. Is that correct? Legislative chairman for NAAA. Our focus this afternoon is to talk about grassroots and how we can affect legislation in our state and here on the national level. And we're going to draw from the resources and experiences of the folks who've been there and done that, so to speak. I can tell you briefly from my time in the legislature in South Carolina, what seems like a long, long time ago now, having grassroots campaigns truly affects the outcome of so many pieces of legislation. But it doesn't begin there, and I'm going to actually let Karen talk about that. We had a brief phone call last week to prepare for this, and she said something, she may have forgotten it, but I wrote it down, that I think is so critical to this whole idea of grassroots campaigning. And at the crux of it is this: you don't wait till you need them to get to know them. And so that's really the crux of grassroots campaigning. So we want to talk a little bit about some successful efforts that have happened across the country at various state associations, and how you might find some ways to make that work back in your state and even here on the national level while we're here in town this week. So let me begin the questioning of the panel. They have no idea how this is going to go, so we'll start with a question, and I'll just try to keep folks on track in terms of time. But let's explore for a moment what some of your processes are in your states. Wayne, let me begin with you and just throw that question to you. How would you describe your grassroots efforts in the state of Utah?
Well, as you know, we're a very small state, but one of the reasons why members join our association is exclusively for advocacy. A lot of the other programs aren't as important as how we're represented on Capitol Hill. And what we've done is tried to involve the members individually to, first of all, find out who their legislators are. I'm always amazed when I ask people to raise their hand in meetings and say, how many of you personally know your legislator? Okay, how many know who they are, what their name is, how did they vote on your issues? And very seldom, and unfortunately, there's usually a half a dozen or maybe less in the room that really know who their legislator is, both House and Senate members on a state level. And so we always encourage our members to, one, go back and find out who they are, because those are the people they voted for. They're the ones that put them in office, and if they're not happy with them, they better find out why they're not happy and better find out how they're voted in.
Absolutely. Arlen, let me throw that question to you, because I know from our conversation last week, your experience goes across many years and spreads from local to state to national. How would you describe your process, or the process of grassroots in your state?
Well, I'm like Wayne, you have to get to know your people, but I started out years ago in the chamber, and I've been through the chamber boards and stuff, and then I'm on planning and zoning for our city, so I'm involved with legislative stuff there, and I talk to our senators all the time, and we have a legislative meeting every 2 weeks, just our local level, where we've got probably 20 people that come to it, and I do that a lot, so that everybody knows who I am then, I guess. And I go to city council meetings when I have a chance. I go to different functions where there's, the governor might be in town speaking or whoever. So they all get to know you that way. And it's not that hard. And I tell people all the time, you got to be involved somewhat. You don't have to do everything. My wife says I raise my hand too much, but you just got to be involved in some respect to get there. But we had a tri-state governors convention last week in our area, because I'm right on the tri-state, Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And 3 governors are there, so I got to talk to all 3 of them, and you give them your card and you tell them, hey, here's what I'm doing and here's what I'm involved in. And they remember that. Down the road, they do remember that. And I know here's something I did years back already, and everybody can do this in their state. I pulled up, like, this is for the Attorney General. Tells everything. You can get any number you need to get on that. But I've got a whole book. It's like 50 pages of everybody that works for the state of Nebraska. If I need to get a hold of somebody, I can just open my book and I've got it right there. And like here the other day, I'd called Deb Fisher, our senator out here in D.C. She sent me a nice letter back, thanking me for being involved. And she said, anything I can do for you, I'll be glad to do it. Of course, I sit on another board also besides the NIDA. I sit on the Northeast Community College Board of Governors. And that's an election deal. I'll be elected next year, I hope. I'm going to run again, with all the presidents running and everybody. But, it's fun, and I enjoy it. I don't mean to take so much time
Now,
here, but that's
did you
some of the
just start
things.
that process, or how long have you been involved?
Probably 18 years. But the easiest thing to do is you pick up the phone if there's something that's bothering you, and you call your senator and say, hey, can I just ask you, have you looked at this bill really close? Well, I thought I did, but let me look a little closer. Back several years back when the Brownback bill was out, and it was going to include everybody. I asked our senator, I said, have you looked at this? He said, well, let me look. He said, I didn't read very close. I said, well, read it over and let me know. And then I had all my dealers that I knew in our area, hey, call, please call. And after you make enough calls, and you don't get to talk to the senator or anybody the first time probably, but they'll call you back or let you know that they heard from you.
Right.
So, it's very important, and it doesn't cost anything. And it takes 2 minutes of your time. So that's what I stress real hard.
Todd, what about Colorado?
Well, in Colorado, I don't have the experience that Arlen has. I started 4 years ago, and we really were not doing anything at that point in time. So I didn't have the luxury, or the association didn't have the luxury to wait, many years to build the relationships. So we are involved with the lobbyists, and through that conduit, we've been able to make great progress in the last 3-4 years. And what we've done is we did start a political committee fund, and so we generated a lot of action by paying. That's just part of the process. And so we started the first year. We just did a voluntary fundraiser. We made about $6,000. That helped open the doors. They visit with you. The last 2 years, we started a program that's been very successful, incorporating a PAC contribution with our annual dues. And it's an opt-out, but we've raised over $70,000. By the end of this year, we'll have raised over $70,000 for our PAC. And by being able to selectively contribute those funds out, and with our quality legislator, we can just about get in any door fairly quickly now. And we've also invited, we have annual golf tournament. We started with 1 representative playing. The second year we had 8 playing. This year we had over 14 legislators playing, mingling. Because when you have a representative or senator 5 hours captured in a golf cart, you can help that relationship building fairly quick.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So you invite them to not just your convention, but other events throughout the year.
Absolutely. And we also try and attend, as Arlen mentioned, as many events as we can, both sponsorships. There was one baseball game last year that they had a fundraiser at. A couple of our dealers went. And, any opportunity that you can take to get them, to me, it's more comfortable to get them out of their environment, because when they're at the Capitol, they're busy. They'll visit with you on their tight schedule, but if you can get them out of the building at their town hall meetings, we've had success meeting people there, or at least getting to know who they are.
Right. Gus, I, as the questions came down the road, I wanted to hold this one for you. In your state, and the others can be thinking as this question's coming, but in your state, has there been a particular issue that you can recall where you as a dealer benefited from the work of a grassroots effort, or maybe even the state association benefited from the efforts of the association working at the grassroots level?
Yeah, definitely. we had a couple buy here, pay here bills that came out, and I think it was in 2012 or so. And I'm kind of on the same story as Arlen. Over the years, I've sat on several boards, and I think it was actually the Chamber of Commerce was the first board that I sat on right when I got out of college. And I was able to meet our local representatives by being on the board for the chambers, and I started building the relationship. So this isn't anything that, all of a sudden there's these bills and I need to call somebody, and I don't know who I'm going to talk to. At that point, by 2011, I had very good contacts with all our state and federal representatives, and it had been just built over the years. Some of it had been just meeting them at different events. Others I've had supported, which I highly recommend. It doesn't take a lot of money to do that, and usually when you go to these fundraising events and support them, a couple $100, and you get one-on-one time with your local representative. And after you've done a couple of these things, they know who you are. And just like this is something I tell my salespeople. I tell them, hey, when you're out there, remember that everybody, and you're trying to sell cars, remember that everybody wants a friend in the industry. Somebody wants to have a friend that's a used car guy, that they can go to, that they can trust. And it's the same thing with our local representatives and our state representatives. They want somebody in our industry they can trust. And if you're the go-to person, they're going to go to you, and because they know you. They know who you are. Over the years, it's built a relationship to where now when there's potential bills that are going to pass in our state, they give me a call, and or their staff, which is important too. Make sure you know the staff that works for your representative, because sometimes they're very busy, but a lot of times it's the staff that make a lot of the decisions, and they give the input to their boss. But they'll contact me and they'll say, Gus, we got this bill coming through. What do you think? We want to get your opinion from, on what your industry is. And I've been able to do that and reach out to our state or reach out to NIADA and get an opinion on different things. So that's important. But specifically when these bills came out, I immediately, the first thing that I did is I reached out to the different boards that I had sat on, and I asked if they could write letters against it. And I would say within 48 hours, I had the chambers that had written letters, I had our Board of Trade, and I had both the cities that I'm in write a letter opposing the bill. Reached out to NIADA, reached out to our state senator and state assemblyman, and they both told them what was going on, and they said, yes, we're going to do everything we can to make it stop. So it happened really quick, but it was because of that relationship that I had already built over the years. So I think if you're going to learn anything about this whole experience is you got to start early, and you can't wait until the last minute to start building those relationships.
Karen, let me take this question back to you. When we were on the phone the other day, you described the process in a particular way, the grassroots process. And I suspect in your role with Cox that you get a chance to talk at various levels of government. Mm-hmm. You referred to it as a relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how you see that in your role as an advisor to Cox Automotive and to NAAA.
It is definitely a relationship business, and I think all of you as car dealers understand the relationship business. I think one of the most important things that you need to do is know your audience. I know that when I need to reach out to someone, because I do cover it at the federal level as well as all of the states, so I'm unable to build every relationship that I need. So I will research someone and learn what is important to them. I think the scenario I gave on the phone the other day is every car I've ever bought, I'm a family of two. They sell me an SUV because they know I need somewhere to put my son's football equipment. All they did was find out what I needed, and that is what they spoke to. And that is the same thing that you need to do whenever you are doing your grassroots efforts campaigns. I would also encourage you to not only utilize your association, but other industry trade associations. Lobbying is a team sport. We've all heard Santi talk this morning about NIADA, NADA, and NAAA all working together to defeat the Blumenthal bill and make it to where that we were not grounding 1 in 5 cars on the road because they have an open recall. I don't think that we would have been successful if each industry association had gone separately with a somewhat different message. It wouldn't have worked. It took the power of all of those industry associations working together, and you can leverage lots of different associations within your industry. A lot of my resources are you, Jeff Martin in Texas, Lisette in Florida. You are my tools whenever I need help with other industry associations. So I would say leverage those relationships as well.
Karen, to quote you, this is what you actually said, if I wrote it down correctly. The time to protect your business is not when you need them. And that's the core of grassroots efforts, is not when we need something from them, is to get to know them before we need something from them and become, maybe as Gus has said, and as you probably play out in your role, Karen, is we become a resource for them, someone they go to. Arlen, you mentioned that maybe the senator had not read the bill when you called about that particular piece of legislation. Who do you suppose reads that bill first?
Their people that work
their staff.
Yeah, they do. And so, and you got to, like you say, get to know those people too, because they're helpful. When I walk into their office, a lot of times those people know you. You know, they know who you are, and I say, I'm from Nebraska. Oh, you're the Husker fan. I said, well, not this year. They're in training this year. But no, it's very important, and like Todd here, we're so proud of him with NIDA, is really proud. What he's done with Colorado in the last 4 years is, you know, and Wayne and his son
team sport.
But Wayne and his son do a good job as a state exec. But this guy here, I was so proud of him at the convention this last year. His grandchildren were up on his shoulders and they were all excited. And I mean, he's just done a great job for Colorado. And I know the guys that are here from Colorado will say the same thing. Right. So we're, you know, as a member of the NIDA, we're really proud of that too, that what he's done with us. And so.
Right. Well, that opens the door for maybe the next, Wayne, do you have something you add?
I was just going to add to the business relationship issue with lobbying, because many times we just think on the representatives and their staff and so forth, but we also got to remember that when bills go to our state legislators, they're always reviewed by the various government entity that's affected, be it DMV or public safety or commerce. Those are the people we also need to get on our side and visit with them regularly. We make it a point to go to them before the session and say, hey, do you have anything coming up through the Department of Commerce that is going to affect us? And if we don't have those relationships, many times they're not willing to share those kinds of things. But because we have a relationship, most of the time they're calling me saying, hey, we're going to have a bill we're working on. Here's what it's going to do. What do you think? And so those relationships go on. And then one more thing on relationships, don't overlook those who are also lobbying at the legislature who do like workers' comp, insurance issues. I mean, there are so many things that affect car dealerships. We have to develop those relationships as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we transition to yet another topic, let me ask the audience, how many of you have worked at the grassroots level in a campaign of one of your state representatives, senators, or congressional delegation members here in Washington? At the grassroots level, you've put signs up in the yard, you've worked on the campaigns, not just donated money, but you were out there with the rest of them, okay? Look around the room real quick, okay? Now to my panel, does more work need to be done at that level?
Oh, yeah.
At that level? Because that's really where it starts, isn't it? That's where it really starts. Those are the folks that can get questions answered that the rest of us can't get answered. When you know that Gus has worked in the campaign of one of his state senators or representatives, Gus can get a response. Or even a check sometimes can't get a response. That relationship can get a response. Those are not the names and faces that these elected officials forget. They remember the names of the folks who were there before they were elected and then help keep them in office. When they are elected, and certainly later as we are now trying to position our opinions and perspectives on various pieces of legislation here in D.C. tomorrow, each association doesn't approach that exactly the same way. I know some associations have their executive directors that are also their lobbyists in their state capitals and here in D.C., and others have hired lobbyists. To any member of the panel, I know there's some various opinions on this. How is it set up in your state, and how has that worked? How is it set up in your state, and how does it work?
Colorado has a lobbyist firm, and it's important. I went down when I was first started, I went down to the Capitol by myself, trying to knock on doors, and it was, somewhat futile. We did have the lobbyist in place at that time. The year after that, we started actively pursuing, just kind of playing defense at that point in time. But to Colorado, I think we have probably one of the best lobbyists. She knows everybody. Her partner is on the other side of the fence, if you will, so we can cover all the ground. But it's a full-time, year-round job in Colorado with what we've been doing. And so I would not be able to do it by myself by any stretch of the imagination. So in Colorado, lobbyists is worth every penny.
Wayne, how do you folks do it in Utah?
For the most part, our staff does the lobbying, as well as all the day-to-day management, but how's the best way to say this? Because, you have to build those out. I mean, I asked a legislator once, what's most important, who do you like to hear from? And he says, 3 people. Says, the number one person I like to listen to is my constituent. That's why it's important for the members to be engaged in that. Number 2 is those who run associations, because we know they're going to be there year after year, time after time. And the third one is the hired gun lobbyists, because they're there to be paid to do a certain thing and really aren't dedicated necessarily to the long term of what they're talking about. So we feel that if we organize our constituency first and we support that with what we do as an association, again, all that takes time. You can't do that when a crisis comes up. It has to be done on a long-term basis. So sometimes situations come up like with Todd where you have to do something quick and you don't have that relationship. You're certainly at a disadvantage, and that's why it's important to start early before you have those crises.
Gus?
In California, we have a lobbyist on staff.
Okay.
And it works out good. He's been lobbying for a very, very long time, so he's got a lot of connections up at the state level.
Arlen, how do you folks do it in Nebraska?
Our state exec does it right now, and we do hire somebody at different occasions. And of course, I've got connections on the college side because we have a lobbyist, so I kind of use him too. So you just get to know people, and that's how you get things done. I mean, just like us, we pretty much do the same things as far as what we belong to. And I was talking to him earlier. I said, I'm stealing some of your thunder, but we both do about the same thing. So.
When you made the decision to hire a lobbyist, there are costs involved in that process. Can you give the audience an indication of maybe general numbers as to what it costs to have lobbyists available in your state, both part-time and full? I mean, sometimes we do it on an issue basis, and sometimes we do it on an annual basis. Any perspectives on that?
Now I sound like government because my answer is it depends.
It depends.
If you're going to have somebody hire just for one bill, as opposed to what California does, they have a lobbyist on retainer or whatever the case may be. It depends on how that's set up, whether they're going to do one bill or look at the whole session. For a lobbyist, we're probably a lot less than what it would be in California, because typically everything in Utah is less than California, cost-wise. Typically, we'll see associations spend from anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 for a lobbyist for a particular bill. We manage a lot of other different associations, and we've seen hired lobbyists, and we've hired them ourselves as well. But that's tend to be where they ranges from about $20,000 to $50,000 for just a single bill. Mm-hmm. Now, as you all know, our industry always has a lot of bills on. Typically my bill list is anywhere from 50 to 60 bills just for the automotive industry. And so if you need to hire a lobbyist for each one of those, it certainly becomes unaffordable, which the situation that California uses makes sense because he can cover all of those issues for a fee.
Yeah, in California, we actually got a pretty good deal. He's been our lobbyist, and again, I don't even know how long, but it's been a lot longer than I've been on the board. And but he's running about $24,000 a year, and it covers, regardless of how many times he has to do or what he has to do. It's a one-time kind of deal, monthly. It's $2,000 a month, and that pretty much covers it. But I will say that when the buy here, pay here bills came out, we chose to hire an additional lobbying firm that we knew had a little bit more of a connection with a couple of the people that we needed to get through to. So we ended up spending, and actually NIADA stepped in and helped out along with a bunch of friends. And we all pulled money together, and we hired an additional lobby firm to help him.
Colorado is fortunate to have some wonderful board members for negotiators, because we're at 25,000 on a retainer, and that varies a little bit depending on how many bills we're trying to run or defend that year. and it may go up a little bit this year because we're planning to do a third bill. That was for 2 bills.
So how do we pay for it? What are the efforts that you use to fund those of you who have PACs? What are the efforts you use to raise monies to fund that? I mean, we know of yours recently with the membership option, but are there other ways that you raise money?
In Colorado, you cannot use PAC money to pay for a lobbyist. So every state is different
Right.
for their political funds. So it just comes out of the general membership. That's part of
Okay.
the dues, member benefits, as Wayne mentioned, is the advocacy
Okay.
part of it.
Yeah, we have it as a separate line item on the yearly invoice that you get for membership. So there's a separate, and I can't remember how much the voluntary donation is, but it's on there.
So it's an opt-in.
Yeah, correct.
One thing, I want to toot NIDA's horn a minute, but we hired a lobbyist here a few months back, or a year, not quite a year, but on a bill in Oregon. And I think, if I remember right, it was like $5,000, but the bill got stopped. And this is what I wanted to say this because we're running this big membership drive. And when you people are talking to other dealers, you can say, you know, part of your dues that goes to NIDA, we do a lot of things for different states all over the country. If there's something comes up, we help California. I think we've been in New Mexico. You know, so there's a lot of advantages that the dealers don't understand, you know, what it costs them to become a member. And I'm not trying to get off track here, but, you know, this is what we do. And we're always out there trying to help that dealer, whether it's a big dealer, or it's a big buy here, pay here dealer, or it's a big retail dealer, or a small dealer, a 12-car a month dealer. Everybody gets treated the same, and we want to help everybody, and we want to grow. And that's why the CFPB and the FTC like us, because we're always asking, what can we do to be better?
Right. Just as a point of information, in the Carolinas, we're obviously a 2-state association, and we sort of use a combined effort with the lobbyist and the executive director. Our executive director is very visible at both of the legislative houses in North and South Carolina. In North Carolina, he works alongside a lobbyist that we have on retainer. He's actually in the audience. I think Fred Bone. Fred, stand up. We certainly can't do what we do in the Carolinas without Fred. Glad to have him. He's very faithful in coming to our meetings and being a part of our group. And then on a case-by-case basis in South Carolina, we sometimes retain lobbyists to help us there. But certainly the strong role of the executive director plays in that is crucial, especially as it relates to the agencies of the state, DMV and others, that he has a strong relationship with leadership in those agencies, which helps us when we're trying to forward some piece of legislation, or, as Arlen said, maybe stop a piece of legislation that could be harmful to us. And if Fred had the microphone, he could tell probably about 3 or 4 things within the last few months. As you know, North Carolina just went home, it seems like last week. Just went home after a long session. It was the short session that became the long session, and he and John were very successful in getting some things both stopped and a couple of things moved forward in the legislative process. Before I open it for questions from the audience, Karen, any of you on the panel have anything that you would like to add that maybe we haven't offered by way of questioning?
Well, I know oftentimes whenever you look at the potential cost for a lobbyist and it sounds like a large number, I always stop and look, how much would this bill cost me if I don't stop it? And that number is generally significantly larger than what the costs would be to fight it. And what we do see a lot of as well is once a bad bill gets through, it doesn't stay there. It spreads to other states. So I always think that it is worth the investment, careful analytics to figure out your ROI, but when in doubt, kill it, is my opinion.
That's right. Amen.
Todd?
One quick comment, if you do have an existing PAC or think about opening one up, visit with your CPA regarding the proxy tax, because we were a couple of years behind in ours. Basically what it is the association either pays tax on the lobbying part, because that's not a tax deductible part of your membership. So the association either pays it, or you notify your members what percentage of their dues are going towards the lobbyist. So make sure you're square on that, so you're not surprised.
Any other comments from the panel before we open it up?
I've got a quick one. I've asked a couple of our representatives, hey, how many notices from your constituents do you have to receive, or do you receive before, you kind of say, wait, there's something going on here that I got to look into, just to kind of get an idea. And he said about 25. Because when we receive about 25 calls or 25 emails or 25 of something, that's kind of the number where my staff says, there's something going on here. We need to respond to this. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind when there's something going on, and you need to get at least 25 people to do something to get the message out that something needs to happen. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that it always starts with the individual dealer wanting to do something and make a difference. For a lot of years, even myself, I kind of sat around and not became very involved in our state association. I've always been involved locally with things that are going on, but not on the state level. And when the Buy Here, Pay Here bills came about, I realized how important it was to become involved in the state. I know I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys are here, but just the importance of being involved and getting other people to get involved in the association, that makes a huge difference.
Any other questions? Wayne?
I just make 3 suggestions when you speak with your legislators or government officials. First thing is always tell the truth, because sometimes people tend to grandize issues and kind of say things that kind of keep growing further and further. The second thing is, as much as possible, tell both sides of the stories. That's why they like associations, I think, because we tend to say, here's the good side and here's the bad side, and help them make a judgment. Now, if you're for a bill and you're talking about reasons why you want to defeat your bill, you got to be careful in what you say, but they really appreciate understanding both sides of the issue. That way you can get a better a better commitment out of them. And if you're opposing something, always offer suggestions. Here's some suggestions that we can work on. If we don't want this now, but let's talk about that. Here's some suggestions. And then the last comment I'll make, and I was going to do the same, but I'll do it now. I've always used the statement that says, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu, and many of you have heard that. Okay? Because it is really true, because if you're not at the table being discussed and being part of those discussions, you're probably going to realize the consequences of not being at the table. And then the last one is, there's 10, I learned this from a speaker at NIDA 25, 30 years ago. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Larry Helms or somebody. There's 10 2-letter words that make all this work. And it is, if it is to be, it is up to me. And I think that says it all with government relations, and that it's up to each one of us individually. One of the problems I have in Utah when I talk to some dealers, they say, oh, we don't need to worry, Wayne will take care of that. No, we need every person to be involved in that process.
We don't normally have much problem getting dealer members to tell us what's wrong, do we?
No.
If we gather more than a dozen of us together in one room, we'll find out the challenges that we're facing. It's not always as easy to get them to come to be a part of the fight. And in some of those cases, that's exactly what it is. It's a bit of a fight. We want to open it up to questions. I think I see Sean moving around the room with a microphone. If you have any particular questions regarding grassroots and efforts that you might be involved in that our panel could handle, we'd be willing to entertain those at this point if you have any.
Since I have the mic, I'm going to throw the first one out. And in doing so, I'm going to point out, maybe even embarrass a little bit. We have 5 Northwood University students with us this week. Can I have them stand up for just a minute? Scott, did you see Scott about ready to stand up? I'm a young guy. No, you're not. Sit down. 4 of the 5 in the room. Let's give them a round of applause. They've given up a lot to be here with us this week. Don't sit down yet. They're the future of our industry. So let me throw this out to the panel. Looking at these young folks getting ready to start in our industry, what's the one piece of advice that you would give? What's the one thing that you would have them do to start building grassroots efforts today?
I'll take that one. It's an election year. Get involved right now. Find you somebody in your state, of course, even on the national level. Don't think the presidential campaigns are out of your reach. They need people right now. But get involved at the state and local level right now in an election year. Find some folks, because some of them are going to get elected. Some of the ones that are there now are not going to go back next time. Get involved in those campaigns now, because I'll give you for instance, tomorrow on the Hill when we're meeting with folks, We're meeting with a congressman that was a former suite mate of mine in South Carolina. We're meeting with another congressman that helped get me elected when I was in the legislature, and when I say helped me get elected, he walked as many yards and raised as much money as probably anybody in my effort, and we'll see him tomorrow. But more importantly, there's a young lady I coached in YMCA basketball 20 years ago who's now making schedules happen for a congressman. And that list of relationships goes on and on and on, and it spans decades. It spans decades. So get involved now at the local, state, and even national level in campaigns because you'll be having an impact for decades to come if you do that.
I can attest, too. I spoke with all 5 of them last night, and they're great students, and they're very, very excited about the car business and being in the automobile business in some respect or other. Some will be in a parts area or advertising, and some will be in service, and some will be in sales, but they're all excited. I think we've got one more student here that graduated like maybe 2 years ago, and he's now a used car dealer. Is he in the room? I don't see him, but.
Eric.
Yeah,
Eric.
have him stand too.
Throw him up here too.
Because
Yeah,
he's a
guys.
graduate of Northwood. And my best friend Joe Lascota just loves it when he sees these students. So, and I bet he's here too, isn't he, Joe Lascota?
He's in the back.
Okay. Well, thank you, Joe, for everything you do, too, for the Northwood kids. Because when I took the CMD class, my buddy Joe says, you got to study every night. And I had 2 students to study with each night to take my test the next morning. And I was really glad they were there to help me, believe me. Because it'd been a lot of years since I'd been in school, you know. So, thank you.
Any other advice from the panelists for our students and our recently graduated student?
I just kind of mimic what Arlen had said about just joining and becoming involved in the community. Join if you're a Republican, hopefully you are, join the Young Republican group and become part of that, and you'll be around kids your own age and having fun while you're doing it, and those are going to be the future leaders.
I would just like to say that the political process that is in place is not in place for the politicians. It's in place for you, it's in place for me, and we need to own it. And that needs to be part of your business activities on a regular basis, not a special occasion whenever an issue comes up. It needs to be always in your mind as far as your regular business activities.
And just from my experience, being not quite as new, but somewhat new, make sure that you spread out to both sides of the fence. The first year and a half or so, I was tending towards my personal views, and when you get skunked after you help those people, you're kind of back to square one. So spread the wealth, and because you need both sides.
And I'll make one other comment. I do encourage everyone to participate in your PACs. It is through the PACs that we are able to keep like-minded individuals in office, people who are pro-business, not excessive regulation, and those are the kind of people we need in office to make sure that we are able to protect our businesses.
Okay. Other questions?
Gus, you mentioned the buy here, pay here bills in California, and I know when all that came up, one of the things that I heard was not so much about the lobbyists, but that specifically you had a lot to were a huge part of this in going up and I think testifying before the committees in the assembly. How do you get individual dealers motivated to do things like that? I mean, not just give money and but to actually go testify when there's a bill that we're fighting or we're for. How do you motivate and mobilize the troops in that sense?
Yeah, that was actually my brother that ended up going up there. Yeah, and I can't remember why he went and I didn't, but there was a reason. I was somewhere where I couldn't change my plans. But I think once you realize that it's going to personally affect you and what kind of an effect it's going to have, it motivates you. And it's just going out there, reaching out and making that call and asking. When you ask someone to do something, there's a good chance they're going to do it. But you got to take that step and you have to ask. If you don't ask them to do it, there's no other way to it's just got to happen without asking. But I don't think there's a specific thing. I know that when I saw that the bills were happening, and they already had gone to the stage where they were becoming, they were going to go to a vote, I realized that our state needed some additional help, and that's when I jumped in. And I will tell you that it's your network of friends that make that difference. Not only did I reach out to local dealers, but I'm part of a Dealer 20 group with Leadem, and there's a lot of good ones out there too with NCM and some other ones, but I'm in a Dealer 20 group, and I reached out to my Dealer 20 group members, and they all said, Gus, how much do you need? What can I do to help? So I think you got to think not only in your area, but think outside of the area. And at the time I reached out to NIADA, because our state hadn't reached out to them. So I reached out to them, and they jumped right in on it, and before you knew it, we had a lobbyist group, we had a website set up, and we were going to battle. But it's probably something that if I look back and I said, what could I have done differently? I would have done it a lot sooner. Jumped in a little too late. There was 3 bills. The worst one did not pass, but 2 of them did. But the worst one didn't pass. But if we would have jumped into this thing sooner, I think none of them would have passed. We just got the ball rolling a little bit too late. So it's so important, and it's a lot more expensive too. To jump, I think Karen brought this up. It's a lot more expensive to jump in it once the bill has been created, as opposed to when it's in the process of being created.
I'll address that too. I think one thing with the members, there's kind of a big fear factor that kind of goes with this. A lot of people think that legislators are like way up here. You know what, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like we do, and they're farmers and ranchers and you name it. They come from the business community. Car dealers, you name it. They all come from there, and it's our job to educate them. But if we can educate our dealers on how to make the process simple, like if you ask them simply to send a letter to your legislator, you got to educate them on how the best way to do that is. If I send an email, I really don't care what it says in the text, but in the subject line, it better be vote for Senate Bill 60 or vote no on this bill, because many times that's the only thing that is read. Okay? I can't go through a big diatribe in the base of that email. It's vote no or vote yes. Make sure your message is very clear. And if we educate our dealers to get them involved in that process, then the next one is be on the Ledge Committee, come to the board, go to the Capitol, be actively involved in the process. But you got to kind of overcome that fear factor that many people have working with legislators.
Just one other thing to piggyback that, I completely agree that your subject line is the most important part of that letter, because that is often all that is read. And then your first paragraph should be showcasing your business. Explain the economic value that you bring to your community involvement, your employees, because once they get past that, you've already relayed your message. Here's what I need you to do, and here's why it is important that you do it.
And tell them you're their constituent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other questions? Any other question?
And I don't know if Virginia can talk about, or Virginia IAD can talk about it. I know that Lois, years ago, you guys did an economic impact study, if I remember, for an issue, and I remember it made a huge difference. I mean, you look at it on paper and they can see the numbers and the importance of it.
I'll make a comment about that because I did in the AEC meeting yesterday. One of the things that we don't do a very good job of is advocacy is very interesting in the fact that our members know what we do for them this year, but what are you doing for me right now? Last session really doesn't matter. One of the things we try to do is put a dollar value on advocacy. You know, if this bill were to pass, what kind of economic impact would it have on your business? So when you go out to talk to your members for membership and say, hey, will you trade me this $100 bill for a 20? And he'll say, yeah, how many 20s can I give you, right? So the issue is, if I can show them the value that they just received because we were at the Capitol building, it makes membership a lot easier. Because we worked on a workers' comp bill or a consumer protection bill or a motor vehicle bill, it doesn't matter. What is the economic value to the member, or how much would it cost if that bill were to pass? So monetize legislative process. It really helps people when it comes to membership and joining.
Any other questions? One in the back. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, the panel and the other associations, I never really hear this brought up a whole lot, and I'm right now in the process of trying to strengthen our relationship in Georgia with the GADA, the new car franchises. I'm curious if you guys or any of the other associations meet with the new car side, what kind of relationship you have with the new car side, and so forth. Colorado has a good relationship with CADA. However, you need to be aware that not always are you going to be in lockstep with what they're trying to do. But we cooperate. We passed a couple bills that were in mutual benefit. And as Karen said, it was because of the cooperation. Two were defeated, or two were passed, and another one was defeated last year. So it's just a matter of getting them involved, getting their lobbyists involved if they have one, getting them involved early at the stakeholder meeting so there's no surprises at the end, plan it out as much as you can if there's a specific topic.
In California, we have a good relationship with the New Car Association as well, and we worked on a recall bill with them, which got tabled, but we worked with them on that. And there's been other bills where they've carved out new cars and left used cars in them, and so you do have to kind of be careful. But I think it's better to work with them, and they tend to have more money than we do.
Yeah, Nebraska, we work with them real close too. And now they've approached, I know Steve Jordan has talked to the national NADA, and they want to get more involved with us. They like what we're doing on our leadership conference right now. This is our third year. So there's some exciting things going on in that relationship too. So I think down the road, we're going to get stronger with having NADA involved with NIADA on a lot of these things for all the states.
In the Carolinas, we too have a good relationship with both. In North Carolina, was Bob Glasser. Is Bob still there, Fred? Yeah, Bob Glasser with NADA, and with our folks in South Carolina, and John and Fred do a good job of working that on both sides of the aisle. But we're conscious. We have to make sure they're aware of what we're doing, run that by them, not necessarily get their buy-in, but at least make them aware of what we're doing, and make sure they're not going to run any opposition to legislation that we're concerned about.
I would also add, we have a good relationship with our New Car Association. In fact, they typically spend so much time on franchise law that we're left doing all the regular motor vehicle and other issues ourselves. But also, don't forget other associations that are like-minded thinking, like your RV dealers. They have to comply to the same licensing and titling laws, power sport dealers, marine. Fortunately, in the state of Utah, our company manages all of those. So anything that has to do with automotive, legislators come to us, and that's one of the reasons why they're all separate associations, but we go with I can go there with they understand that we're representing a lot of the automotive industry, and we do that. But don't forget about the other groups that have common interest in those subjects you're going to address.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Well, Sean, you asked the first one. You said why? Why grassroots? Let me close with that question, and I'll yield it to the panel as well. In just a couple of sentences, why grassroots efforts at your side? Why was the question? Have we answered the question? Why? What do you think, Wayne? How do we answer it?
Why have grassroots? Fortunately for us, we live in a free country, and it's the best system that's out there. But free doesn't mean that we can sit by and do nothing. Free means we have to work for that as every other freedom. So in my opinion, I think it was Roosevelt who said, every person owns a percentage of their income to the industry that supports them. And I firmly believe that. That's why we all need to contribute. And just think about if we got every used car dealer in the country to put $100 in a PAC fund. Can you imagine the money we would have? We would have probably millions of dollars, or even, I don't know what those numbers equate to. But it's really going to be up to us. As I said, it's up to us to make that happen.
Karen?
I think as far as why grassroots is because that's where you get down to the constituency, and that is who the legislators really want to hear from, and that is whose voice has the most power. Even whenever we do have hired lobbyists for particular issues, I'm always going with them because they want the business person, whether it's me or my general manager or who it is, but that's who they want to talk to, the people who live in their community. And I actually think grassroots efforts are actually more successful than some of the more expensive other types of efforts because they hear the same message repeatedly and they hear it from their constituents. And I think those are just two very important parts of it.
Yeah, the grassroots is the education part, because if the auto industry is not educating at the grassroots level, the legislatures will not hear both sides of the story. And so the education and the different aspects of the individual businesses that comprise the auto industry are critical for grassroots.
Harlan?
I agree with everything's been said here.
That works.
You're running me out of words
That
here.
works.
So, yeah.
Guess anything?
It's all about the communication. Grassroots gets you that entry point. It opens up that communication flow between yourself and your representatives. But more importantly, it builds the trust. It's very different from when someone you know approaches you and asks you to do something, as opposed to a group of people that you have no idea who they are. So, and you trust that person. So I think that's the important thing, the communication and even more importantly, building that trust.
You know, the legislative process is a bit of a messy process. You got to have friends on both sides of the aisle, sometimes to come together to make things work, and that sometimes is a messy business. But money aside, lobbyists aside, why grassroots? Because grassroots works. It works. It takes a lot of work to make it work, but it works. When the offices are flooded with phone calls, when the offices are flooded with emails, and more importantly, when offices are flooded with visits on legislative days and work and campaign efforts, it makes a huge difference. And that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow up on the Hill. I'm going to close with this. I'm a bit of like a kid in a candy store this week. I got to tell you, I didn't know I was coming to 3 weeks ago. But I'm excited to be here because not only are we going to get to be a part of our visits tomorrow, but we're a part of history tomorrow. And like a kid in a candy store, as we make our visits tomorrow, our schedules are probably going to get all mixed up tomorrow afternoon when they finally decide when they're going to take a vote. And I've been in some pretty neat places across life, but tomorrow's going to be a pretty important day. And you'll know where you were when Paul Ryan or whoever it is gets elected as speaker, because you were here at the NIADA National Leadership Summit. Thank you for letting us be a part of this. A round of applause for our panel.